think we're almost ready. Those who are the attorneys, if you would put your cameras on.
Yes, we're here, Your Honor. All of us.
Okay.
All of the plaintiff is also here, Your Honor.
Okay. All right. I don't know if we have to wait for the officials of the practice to tell us we're ready to go, but I think we're ready. Good afternoon. My name is Judge Cullen. I'll be your presiding judge today. And so the first question is, starting with the plaintiff's attorney, would you just announce the team, and then the defense will do the same thing?
Of course, Your Honor. Good afternoon. My name is Evelyn Kelly, and I, along with my co-counsel, Christopher Reynolds.
Good afternoon, Your Honor.
Good afternoon.
And Wade Reynolds.
Good afternoon, Your Honor.
Represent Mrs. Cameron Thomas in today's case.
Good afternoon, Your Honor. My name is Kaylee Jones, and I'm Cameron Thomas.
Okay.
And our other witnesses, Your Honor.
Okay.
Good evening, Your Honor. My name is Caroline Osborne, and I am Dr. Blake Keswani.
Good afternoon, Your Honor. My name is Franklin Kelly, and I am Dallas Dixon.
Okay.
And that is the plaintiff team, Your Honor.
Thank you, ma'am. For the defense?
Yes, Your Honor. My name is Nia Boyd, and today I represent the defendant in today's case, Dr. Aria Davis. I will be delivering the opening in today's case, and I will also be crossing Cameron Thomas along with the director, Dr. Skylar Venkatason. At this time, my co-counsel will now introduce themselves.
Good afternoon, Your Honor. My name is Samyukta Venkatraman, and I represent the defendant in today's case. I'll be doing the direct examination of Dr. Aria Davis and the cross-examination of Dr. Blake Keswani.
Good afternoon, Your Honor. My name is Kaye Burgess. Today, I'll be delivering the cross-examination of Dallas Dixon, the direct examination of Chris Canary, as well as the closing arguments for the defense. Our witnesses will now introduce themselves.
Good afternoon, Your Honor. My name is Sebastiana Emil, and I will be portraying Dr. Aria Davis today.
Good afternoon, Your Honor. My name is Layla Childress, and I will be portraying Chris Canary today.
Good afternoon, Your Honor. My name is Faith Dixon, and today I will be Dr. Skylar Venkatason.
Okay, well, welcome everyone. So before we begin with opening statements, are there any preliminary matters that the attorneys would like to address?
Yes, Your Honor. Permission to address those?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, Your Honor. First, we'd like to raise awareness that in this jurisdiction, that witnesses are not sequestered according to Rule 4.9, and that according to Rule 4.4, they be deemed previously sworn in for sake of time.
Okay.
Yes, Your Honor. We'd also like to note that this case has actually been bifurcated, and so this trial is dedicated to the liability aspect of this lawsuit, and that damages would be a different trial.
Agreed.
All right. Do you have preferences of whether we stand or sit during directs or crosses?
Whatever you're comfortable with is fine with me.
Yes, Your Honor. And would you like us to ask permission before screen sharing exhibits?
That's a good idea because it allows the other attorney to have an opportunity to object if they think it's necessary.
Yes, Your Honor. And then finally, do you mind if we go ahead and test the screen sharing function real quick to make sure it's working?
That's probably a good idea. We've had some problems before, so.
Yes, Your Honor. My co-counsel will be screen sharing the cover sheet of the case just to test it.
Okay. Let's see how that works.
All right.
Looks like it's working fine.
Yes, Your Honor. And then finally, in advance, I'd like to ask that any time I have remaining for my closing be reserved for the plaintiff's rebuttal.
Okay, just remind the timekeepers when you begin your closing.
Of course, Your Honor. With that, the plaintiff is ready to proceed.
Okay. Are there any preliminary matters on behalf of the defendant?
Yes, Your Honor. We would just like to enter Exhibit 6 now, seeing that most parties agree that it is the autopsy report of Sloan Thomas, if that's okay with the plaintiff.
Is the plaintiff stipulating to that exhibit, the autopsy?
Yes, Your Honor. According to stipulation 8, we have agreed that it may be entered at any point once the record has been opened.
Okay. Well, we'll save a lot of time by doing it now. So since everyone's in agreement, that sounds like a good plan. All right. Well, if the timekeepers are ready, plaintiff, well, let's hear your opening statement.
Yes, Your Honor. Permission to proceed?
Granted.
The defendant prescribed death. May it please the court, Your Honor, opposing counsel, and members of the jury. December 31st, 2017. Cameron Thomas is talking with her only son, Sloan, on the phone. She says goodbye, she hangs up the phone, and she goes to bed. January 1st, 2018, the next day. Cameron Thomas is asleep, and Sloan is away at a college party on campus. But suddenly, Mrs. Thomas is awoken by the ringing of her phone. So she answers it, and she is told to hurry to the hospital and that Sloan is in trouble. So she rushes to the Richmond University Medical Center as fast as she can, only to discover that her only son, Sloan Thomas, had passed away that New Year's morning from a drug overdose. Why? Because the defendant prescribed death. Now, today you will hear that as a college basketball player, Sloan was injured several times. He saw a doctor, and that doctor prescribed the addictive narcotic Vicodin HP. Years later, Sloan was injured again. Again, he saw a doctor, and again, that doctor prescribed Vicodin. But not only did she prescribe it again, that doctor extended that prescription twice, the same injury. In fact, that doctor prescribed Vicodin to Sloan a total of 5 times. All of these prescriptions, every single one, was the very maximum dosage for Vicodin. Who was the doctor who prescribed this medication? The defendant, Dr. Aria Davis. The defendant prescribed death. That's why I, Wade Reynolds, along with my co-counsel, are representing Cameron Thomas in this case. Now, we as the plaintiff bear and welcome the burden of proof in today's case. We have to prove to you, based on a preponderance of the evidence, or simply more likely than not, 1, that the defendant violated the standard of care when treating Sloan Thomas, and 2, that the violation of the standard of care was the direct and proximate cause of Sloan Thomas's death. We intend to prove that the defendant did violate his standard of care, which he carelessly prescribed unjustifiable amounts of an addictive medication to Sloan. Now, in order to prove this and fulfill our burden, we, the plaintiff, will call 3 witnesses to the stand today. First, you will hear from Mrs. Cameron Thomas, the mother of the late Sloan Thomas herself. She will tell you how Sloan played basketball in high school and college, how once in a 2013 game, Sloan was injured, how he went to see the defendant, and how the defendant prescribed a week-long course of Vicodin HP as a painkiller. She will tell you how later in 2017, Sloan was injured again. Again, he went to see the defendant. Again, the defendant prescribed Vicodin. She will tell you how the defendant extended that prescription twice for the same injury. Now, Mrs. Thomas will testify to the learning of her son's addiction to this medication. She will tell you how she even sent her son to drug rehab. Finally, she will testify to how Sloan was injured once more, and he went to see the defendant shortly before his death. And what did the defendant do? The defendant prescribed more Vicodin. Next, we will call to the stand Dr. Blake Kizwani, an expert in orthopedic surgery and sports medicine. Dr. Kizwani will share with you her expert opinion in today's case. She will explain how the defendant violated in 4 different ways the standard of care that was owed to Sloan Thomas. The evidence will show that Sloan actually finished one of his prescriptions from the defendant far sooner than he should have. But Dr. Kizwani will tell you how not only did the defendant fail to recognize the sign of addiction, but she extended that prescription twice. Not only this, Dr. Kizwani will tell you how the defendant failed to properly inform Sloan Thomas of the risks, dangers of Vicodin. She will tell you how the defendant could have acted differently, spared Sloan his fate. Lastly, you will hear from Mr. Dallas Dixon, who is a friend of Sloan's. He will walk you through his experiences with his best friend, all the way up to Sloan's overdose on January 1st, 2018. Now, the evidence will show that when Dallas Dixon heard that Sloan was taking Vicodin from the defendant, he was concerned because he knew how dangerous Vicodin could be. He will share with you everything that Sloan shared with him about his various prescriptions from the defendant. Finally, he will walk you through his experiences of a New Year's Eve party that he attended with Sloan. Party where Sloan died of a Vicodin overdose. Members of the jury, Sloan Thomas did not have to die. And he would not have died had the defendant not carelessly prescribed outrageous amounts of an addictive medication. He would have survived, but the defendant prescribed death. At the conclusion of this case, my co-counsel, Ms. Evelyn Kelly, will come before you and ask that you find the defendant liable. Thank you.
Okay. Is there an opening statement for the defense?
Yes, Your Honor. May I proceed?
Yes, ma'am.
May it please the court. He controlled his choices. I want you to picture something. It's a college student and he's at a party. Now, he knows that he shouldn't be there, but he's there anyway because he's desperate. And the reason that he's desperate is because he needs more pills. And finally, he finds what he's looking for. So he takes a few more pills and then chooses to drink alcohol. And then he's found dead. Members of the jury, the story I just described to you is exactly what happened to Sloan Thomas the night of his death. And it's because of the choices that he made that night and the choices that came before that night that we lost a talented young student athlete. My name is Nia Boyd, and today I represent the defendant in this case, Dr. Arya Davis. As a defense, we don't have a burden. That relies solely with the plaintiff, and they have to prove to you by a preponderance of the evidence, which means more likely than not, that Dr. Arya Davis breached her duty of care and that she was the proximate cause of Sloan Thomas's death. But they won't be able to do this today. And the reason they won't be able to do this today is because I want you to keep 3 questions in mind. 1, what did Dr. Davis know when prescribing Vicodin HP to Sloan? 2, was that prescription reasonable based off what she knew? And 3, what bad choices did Sloan Thomas make? Well, let's take that one by one. First, you'll hear from Dr. Davis. Specifically, you'll hear about what she knew and what she didn't know. Now, Mr. Reynolds mentioned a call from Cameron Thomas talking about rehab, but you'll learn that Cameron Thomas never specified what kind of rehab. You'll learn that Dr. Davis never knew it was drug rehab. And you'll find that Sloan Thomas never updated the form to reflect it as drug rehab. But was it reasonable based off of what she knew? Yes. You'll hear testimony from Dr. Skylar Venkatasan, an expert in sports medicine and orthopedic surgery, and she'll take the stand and tell you that based off of what Dr. Davis knew and the information that was given to her by the Thomas family, it was reasonable to prescribe Vicodin HP to Sloan Thomas because he didn't show any warning signs. And finally, what bad choices did Sloan Thomas make? Well, first, you'll find out that his time at drug rehabilitation was never documented on the sheet, the medical history form that was given by Dr. Davis to Sloan. You'll find that Sloan Thomas never updated this form to reflect his time at drug rehab. I want to touch on something that Mr. Reynolds said. He said that she prescribed death. But you'll hear that one of the choices that Sloan Thomas made was to go to that party. And at that party, he made his fatal choice, despite repeated warnings of mixing alcohol and Vicodin HP. Members of the jury, we understand that this is a difficult case. It's hard to blame someone so talented and gifted, and we understand that. But Sloan Thomas controlled his choices, and Dr. Davis is not liable. Members of the jury, at the end of today's trial, my co-counsel, Kaeo Burgess, will come before you and ask you to find Dr. Aria Davis not liable because Sloan Thomas controlled his choices. Thank you.
Thank you, counsel. So judges, what's going to happen now is we're going to rate the first two, the opening statements. So if you go to the screens, we'll take a couple minutes to do that. And then I'll get back to you, hopefully when we're done. Okay, not hearing anything different from the judges. I'm going to presume that we're all done. The plaintiff can call their first witness.
Yes, Your Honor. The plaintiff calls Mrs. Cameron Thomas to the stand. Permission to proceed?
Yes, ma'am, you've been previously sworn. Go ahead, counsel.
Please introduce yourself to the court.
Hi, my name is Cameron Lee Thomas.
And what do you do for a living, Mrs. Thomas?
Well, ever since 2002, which was actually when my husband Rowan died, I have been working as a library curator at the University of Richmond.
And why are you here in court today?
I am in court today because I am suing the doctor who prescribed the drug that killed my son.
And can you tell us a little bit about your son?
Yeah, so the first thing I think of when I think of my son Sloan is basketball. It was his life. He loved it so much. He played it all throughout high school, and then he even started attracting the attention of several college scouts.
Did he end up playing basketball in college?
He did, yes. He was offered a full ride scholarship at the University of Richmond, actually, which was our hometown. So that was really exciting.
Okay. And did he ever get injured while playing basketball?
He did, yes, multiple times. The first time, I believe, was in 2013, February. Yeah.
Okay. And did you take him to see a doctor when he got injured?
I did, yes. I was recommended Dr. Aria Davis, and so I took him to see her.
Okay. How did that examination go?
Well, it went pretty well. Sloan and I got there, and the first thing we did was we filled out all of the required forms. So that was.
Would you recognize a copy of those forms if I would show them to you?
I would, yes, ma'am.
Okay. Your Honor, at this time, permission to for my co-counsel to screen share what has previously been marked as Exhibit 5A1. I believe you're muted, Your Honor.
Thank you, counsel.
No worries.
Is there any objection from the defense?
No objections at this time, Your Honor, no.
Okay, without objection, you can share that at this time.
Yes, Your Honor. Mrs. Thomas, what is this?
Would you mind scrolling down? Okay, yes, this is the form that Sloan and I filled out in 2017.
Okay. And does it appear to be a fair and accurate copy?
It does, yes. It has a doctor's signature, which I hadn't seen the last time I saw it, but other than that, it appears to be accurate.
All right. At this time, Your Honor, the plaintiff moves to enter Exhibit 5B1.
Not hearing any objection, it'll be admitted.
Yes, Your Honor. Mrs. Thomas, did you fill out this form with Sloan?
I did, yes, I helped him with it.
All right. And were there any questions that you found confusing to fill out?
Well, if you wouldn't mind scrolling down to the second page. Yes, under family history, I was kind of unsure about exactly what to put. I was assuming it meant Sloan's family, and so like Sloan's grandparents, but it wasn't very specific, so.
All right. And to your knowledge, or was there anything that Dr. Davis clarified with you once you finished filling out this form?
Not really, no. Dr. Davis never said anything else about this form, so I assumed everything was filled out correctly.
Okay. And did Dr. Davis ever ask you about a family history of substance abuse?
She did not, no.
Okay, thank you. So what did Dr. Davis end up prescribing for your son?
She prescribed, well, in 2013, after that injury, I believe she prescribed a 7-day course of Vicodin HP. But in 2017, she prescribed a 30-day course because Sloan had just had surgery. So.
All right. And had you ever heard of Vicodin HP before?
I had not, no. We never would have heard about Vicodin HP if it wasn't for Dr. Davis.
Okay. And did Dr. Davis walk you through any concerns or warnings about this Vicodin HP?
Not really. Actually, she was very brief, which I guess I should have been more concerned at the time than I was, but I was so focused on Sloan that I didn't really think much of it.
Okay. Did Sloan seem to recover in the 2017 incident?
He did, yes. He had a torn rotator cuff in 2017. And so he had a surgery that was scheduled and that went really well. And so I believe like during the summer or like the early summer, he had pretty much recovered, so.
All right. And did you have any more concerns about the Vicodin HP drug that your son had?
Well, there was an incident in June 6th. I came home and I heard really loud music playing in Sloan's room, which was kind of unusual. And I walked in and Sloan and his friend were playing a video game, so.
Okay. And did you see anything out of place when you walked into his room that day?
Well, there were several empty beer bottles thrown about the room, which is very unusual for Sloan. They might have been his friends, but there were also 2 prescription bottles on the dresser.
How many prescription bottles was your son supposed to have?
Only 1.
All right. So what did you do when you saw that?
Well, I confronted Sloan about it, of course. He denied having drank the alcohol, but he did admit that Dr. Davis was being really unresponsive and he was in so much pain. And so he had gotten extra pain medication from a college friend.
And what did you do when you heard that?
Well, I took him to a drug rehabilitation director.
All right. And did you call Dr. Davis to inform her that your son was going to a drug rehabilitation program because of Vicodin HP?
I did, yes. I called Dr. Davis's clinic. That was the only way to directly talk to her. And I asked the receptionist if Dr. Davis had any questions to let me know. And I never heard back, so I just have to assume that she had no questions.
When did Sloan come back from drug rehabilitation?
Objection, speculation.
I'm sorry, counsel, I didn't hear the question. Would you repeat it for me, please?
It was actually to the response of the witness, Your Honor. I can expand on my objection.
Well, I know, but I have to know what the question was before I can tell what the objection is. What was the question again?
Yes, Your Honor. The question was, when did Sloan return from drug rehabilitation?
And what was the objection?
Your Honor, that was not the question I was objecting to, and I was objecting to the witness's response. I believe that the response from the witness to the previous question was the response to the previous question was that I assumed that Dr. Davis had no questions, Your Honor.
And
Your
what
Honor,
was
may I
your
respond?
objection? Well, I don't know what the objection is.
Oh, it was speculation, Your Honor. My apologies.
Your Honor, may I respond?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, Your Honor. I would agree with opposing counsel if my witness had just said that the defendant had no questions. That would definitely be speculation. However, my witness clearly stated that she had told the receptionist that if the doctor had had any questions, that he could reach out and contact her. And she clearly said that because of that, she assumed she didn't have any questions. She was very clear that she wasn't definitely speculating. She was just saying that, to her knowledge, she had to assume that she didn't have any questions.
Your Honor, may I make a request?
Sure.
Could the witness rephrase it to say that it was?
Okay, the witness, it's not a matter of whether the witness can rephrase. The question really is whether the question is objectionable, and it appears it is not. And then if the answer is objectionable, and in this case, it is not, but it's pure fodder for cross-examination. So the objection is overruled.
Yes, Your Honor.
Yes, Your Honor.
Next question, counsel.
Yes, Your Honor. Mrs. Thomas, did Sloan come back from drug rehabilitation after the summer?
He did, yes. I believe that Sloan was in Four Seasons drug rehab for about 60 days. So he came back around early August.
All right. And to your perception, did he seem to be recovered from that summer?
It seemed to be, yes. He was so much happier and just back to his normal self, which was really reassuring.
Okay. And did Sloan get injured at any other time during that fall semester?
He did, yes. He got injured again in November of 2017.
Okay. And Mrs. Thomas, did he ever mention to you anything about being prescribed Vicodin HP again?
No, I never heard anything about any pain medication, let alone Vicodin HP.
Okay. Now, Mrs. Thomas, I know that this can be hard for you. So if you need a moment at any time, let me know. But I think it's important for the jury to hear about the New Year's Eve party. What was happening on December 31st, 2017?
Well, Sloan had been invited to a New Year's Eve party, which he was excited about, and he was about to turn 21, and so he was super excited about that as well. So I told him to go and have fun.
Okay. And did you hear back from Sloan that evening?
Well, not really. Actually, around 4 in the morning, I got a call from the the medical center in Richmond that Sloan was in trouble and that I needed to come immediately.
What did you find when you arrived at the medical center?
Well, someone had said something about an overdose and that it was too late and that they had done all they could.
I'm sorry, Mrs. Thomas, but when, to your knowledge, was the last time that the defendant prescribed Vicodin to your son?
Well, the day after Sloan's passing, I received an invoice from my insurance company, I believe.
Objection, Your Honor. Hearsay to the invoices.
Well, I don't know if she's going to tell me what the invoice says, but the answer is certainly non-responsive. So that will be sustained. Counsel, you might try a different question.
Yes, Your Honor. Mrs. Thomas, at any point during your interactions with the defendant, did she ever mention that Vicodin might be addictive to your son?
No, She never said anything about it being addictive or even dangerous. Yet here we are.
Thank you. No further questions at this time, Your Honor.
Okay. Please answer counsel's question for the defendant.
May I proceed, Your Honor?
Yes, ma'am.
Good afternoon, Ms. Thomas. Before I begin, I just want to make sure that you can see and hear me okay.
I can, yes.
I want to talk a bit about your family's history. Your family does have a history of addiction, right?
Yes, my sister actually died from an addiction. So,
And Sloane's grandfather also had an addiction, right?
to alcohol. I don't know if you could say that was an addiction, but he was an alcoholic, yes.
He was in AA meetings, right?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
He was in AA meetings, right?
Meaning Sloane's grandfather?
Yes.
Yes, that is true.
And you never told Sloane about this history of addiction?
Well, no, that's true. I really did not want Sloane to think ill of either his aunt or his grandfather, so I never told Sloane.
I want to talk a bit about where you were on February 6, 2013. You and Sloane had gone to Dr. Davis's office, right?
Yes. Yeah, February 6th, yeah.
And you'd been prescribed, Sloane had been prescribed Vicodin HP, right?
After that appointment, not before that appointment, but yes.
And he was given a medication guide, right?
For Vicodin?
Yes.
Yes, he was.
You guys also go back to Dr. Davis in March 16th, 2017, right?
Yes, that is true.
And in that visit, you had to fill out a medication guide again, similar to the last visit.
Yeah, it was basically the exact same thing.
Your Honor, may I have permission to screen share what's already been entered into evidence as Exhibit 5B1?
Yes, hearing no objection, you can do that.
Now, Ms. Thomas, I want to look at what was circled in the social history section. Now, it says, how often do you drink? Never, right?
That's true. Yeah, as far as I know, that's true.
And then another question on this form says, any history of pain pill abuse? And it says no, right?
Yes, that is what it says.
Oh. I want to address something that you said on direct. You said that the form was confusing to fill out, right?
Some parts were, not all of it, but.
But you never took this confusion to Dr. Davis, did you?
No, I did not.
I want to talk about the prescription bottles that you mentioned. During that time, you noticed that one of those prescriptions did not have Sloane's name on it, right?
You mean in June of 2017? Okay, the ones I saw in his dresser. Yes, that is true. One did not have Sloane's name on it.
Which means that it couldn't have came from Dr. Davis, right?
I mean, I guess it could have, but I don't know who prescribed that.
You don't know who prescribed it, but it wasn't one of Sloane's prescriptions from Dr. Davis, right?
It wasn't Sloane's prescription. I guess it could have been from Dr. Davis, but I just don't know.
So that's a no?
That's a no, yes.
I want to talk about Sloane's time during rehab. You called the office when Sloane had gone to rehab, right?
I called Dr. Davis's office, yes, ma'am.
But you didn't specify that Sloane was going to drug rehab, right?
I actually don't remember if I specified drug rehab. I know I said rehab, and Dr. Davis had no questions, so.
No, in the call, you didn't say that he was going for Vicodin HP or Vicodin HP addiction, right?
Well, Dr. Davis actually had already known that that was the only medication that Sloan was taking at that time. So no, I did not say anything.
I want to talk about the December 1st visit that Sloan Thomas had with Dr. Davis. This visit was a few months after Sloan had gotten out of rehab, right?
Yeah. So December, yeah, he had gotten out in August, so that is true.
And during that visit, he had been given his medication again.
I actually do not know. I wasn't at that appointment.
Okay. Well, I just want to take a look at the medication guide that was already on the screen. If we could get that up on the screen again, please. Oh, this was the form that he had filled out in March 2017.
Yes. I don't think this is a medication guide, but it was the form he filled out in March 2017.
My apologies, the medical history form. This
Oh,
is
yes, yes.
I want to look at the same questions. It says, how often do you drink alcohol? And it still says never, right?
Yes, ma'am. That is what it says, which, as far as I know, is still true.
But it also says that he still
Objection, Your Honor, asked and answered.
Your Honor,
This is
may I?
Excuse me, this is the same exact document that opposing counsel has already brought up, and she's asking the same exact questions.
May I respond, Your Honor?
Yes, ma'am.
Seeing that Sloan Thomas was provided this form in the last visit that he had with Dr. Davis, I'm expanding on the idea that Sloan Thomas certified that there were no changes to his medical history.
Your Honor.
That's correct. It's not asked and answered because she had asked about the original date where mom was with him. Now she's asking about a different date and incorporating the same form. I'm going to allow the question.
Yes, Your Honor.
Oh, it says any history of pain pill abuse, and it still says no, right?
That is true, yes.
I want to take a closer look at what the bottom of this form says. It says, I certify no changes to my medical history since March 16th, 2017. And those are Sloan's signatures, right?
Yes, it is.
And the date next to it says December 1st, 2017, right?
Yeah, I guess he might have just assumed that Dr. Davis was already thinking about the drug rehab. I don't know. I wasn't in Sloan's mind, so I don't know why he filled it exactly out like that.
But that is the date, and those are his initials, right?
Yes, ma'am.
So based off of this form, Sloan chose not to update the form to reflect his time at drug rehab.
Again, he might have just not thought about it. I wasn't in Sloan's mind. I don't know if he chose to lie. I don't think he would have.
I'm not asking if he chose to lie. I'm simply asking, based off of this form and the questions that were circled, he chose not to update, right?
Well, he said that there were no changes, so I guess you could say that. Yes, ma'am.
Your Honor, I have nothing further for this witness.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Thomas. You're finished for today. Thank you very much. What we're going to do now is we're going to, again, do the scoring, and then we'll come back for your next witness. Okay, judges, are we good? Okay. Yes, sir.
Yes, Your Honor. The plaintiff would like to call Dr. Blake Kiswani to the stand.
Okay,
Permission to proceed?
yes, sir.
Good afternoon. Please introduce yourself to the court.
Hi, I'm Dr. Blake Keswani.
What do you do for a living?
Oh, gracious. I do a lot of different things, but I won't bore you with the details, of course, unless you want me to. But anyways, I am the chief of sports medicine. I am a professor. I'm working with funding from the CDC, and I am head team physician and orthopedist. That's just the general gist of all I do.
Why did you choose this occupation?
Well, I chose this occupation because my nephew, Weston, unfortunately became addicted to prescription opioids, which grew into a heroin addiction and his death from an overdose. And since then, I've just made it my personal mission to educate physicians and the general public on factors contributing to opioid addictions and how to avoid those, just so that nobody else has to experience that tragedy.
And why are you here in court today?
Well, I'm here per the request of Cameron Thomas to testify on my knowledge on the standard of care when prescribing opioid-based pain relievers.
And have you testified in court before?
Yes, I have testified in medical malpractice cases 10 times, and about half of them were for the defense.
So what are your qualifications as an orthopedic surgeon?
Well, so I got my Bachelor's of Science in Biology from Yale, and then I got my MD from Johns Hopkins University, and then later finished an orthopedic surgery residency at Mayo Clinic.
And what practical experience do you have in the field of sports medicine?
Well, I have been the chief of sports medicine at Emory University for around 12 years, where I've been teaching orthopedic surgery since 2012. And I have been an orthopedic surgeon since 2008, where I've worked in the same capacity at the Michigan Sports Center for around 6 years before that.
And are your methods considered acceptable in your field?
Yes, they are.
Your Honor, at this time I would move to enter Dr. Blake Kiswani as an expert in orthopedic surgery and sports medicine.
Any objection?
No objections, Your Honor.
All right, without acceptance, she's seen as an expert.
Thank you, Your Honor. Did you form a conclusion for today's case?
Yes, I did.
And what evidence did you review to arrive at your conclusion?
Well, I reviewed all evidence applicable to Sloan's medical history, like the intake forms, Sloan's autopsy report, Dr. Davis's medical notes, and I reviewed Cameron Thomas's and Dr. Davis's affidavits.
And was all of this sufficient for you to form your opinion?
Yes, it was.
So what was your conclusion?
Well, my conclusion is that Dr. Davis failed to uphold the standard of care in 4 different ways.
Are you familiar with the autopsy report for Sloan Thomas?
Yes, I am.
Your Honor, permission to have my co-counsel screen share a copy of what has already been entered into evidence as Exhibit 6.
Granted.
Based on this document, what was the cause of Sloan Thomas's death?
Well, it says that the cause was a Vicodin overdose.
And could you please read for the jury the bottom paragraph at the bottom of this page? It starts with the decedent.
Yes, so the decedent is a 20-year-old University of Richmond student athlete who suffered respiratory arrest while at a fraternity party after consuming a combination of hydrocodone bitartrate, acetaminophen, and alcohol.
Okay, so in layman's terms, what does this all mean?
Well, this just means that all of these substances mixed together formed a deadly cocktail, if you will. This effectively shut down Sloan's respiratory system and caused him to suffocate.
So let's move on to the standard of care. What exactly is the standard of care?
Well, the standard of care in general refers to what actions can be reasonably expected from a practitioner in a given field, as well as to the duty that a practitioner owes to their patient.
And as for the standard of care, is it generally considered acceptable in your field to prescribe opioids?
Well, Yes, but practitioners are expected to exercise a high degree of caution when prescribing such medications. Presently, since opioid deaths and addictions have been on the rise, it is higher dosages of opioid-based pain relievers.
So you mentioned that Dr. Davis failed to uphold the standard of care in 4 separate ways. What was the first way that this occurred?
Yeah, well, the first way was in 2017, and Sloan Thomas had come to Dr. Davis with a torn rotator cuff, and Dr. Davis prescribed Vicodin for it. Now, Dr. Davis prescribed a 30-day long course, which is 2 to 3 times the standard prescribed safe dosage, which was 1 pill every 6 hours or every 4 hours. And standard care is to prescribe the minimum effective dosage, which in this case would have been 1 pill every 6 hours.
And could you briefly
They may have missed part of your argument, but we'll continue anyway. So the question before the court is whether this doctor saying what she would prefer to have done is working on the standard of care. And the answer is that's not. So the objection at this time for that question is sustained.
Your Honor, we'd like motion to strike the testimony regarding the best practices.
Well, anything that follows or flows from that question is stricken. What's your next question, counsel?
Of course, Your Honor. So could you explain what the third way was that the standard of care was breached?
Yes, so the third way was Dr. Davis's failure to notice substance abuse on Sloan's part. And Sloan finished his 30-day prescription much longer than he should have.
How quickly did he finish his prescription?
Well, Sloan finished his prescription in 21 days, which is over a week sooner than he should have.
And how dangerous was this particular rate of pill consumption to Sloan?
Well, this means that Sloan was taking an average of over 8.57 pills per day, which is perilously close to the danger threshold of 9 pills per day.
And at any time during this prescription, would Sloan have been taking over 9 pills per day?
Most likely, yes.
And how does this whole scenario constitute a breach of the standard of care?
Well, Dr. Davis's failure to notice this very obvious sign of substance abuse was a failure to uphold the standard of care.
So what was the fourth way that Dr. Davis breached the standard of care?
Well, the fourth way was also in 2017 for a later prescription. Sloan came to Dr. Davis with a sprained ankle, and Dr. Davis again overprescribed Vicodin for it.
So in light of all this evidence, what was your conclusion?
My conclusion was that Dr. Davis failed to uphold the standard of care in 4 different ways. Dr. Davis only needed to do this once, but she did so 4 times.
Thank you, Dr. Gazawani. Your Honor, at this time I have no further questions for this witness.
Okay. Please answer defense counsel's questions, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Yes, Your Honor. Good afternoon. Before I begin, can you see and hear me okay?
Yes, I can. Thank you.
So, Dr. Kaswani, as an expert, you'd agree with me that it's important to remain unbiased, right?
Yes, it is.
Experts typically get paid for their work, don't they?
Yes, in some cases they do.
And that's because reviewing case material, coming to conclusions, and testifying in court can take a lot of valuable time.
Yes, they can.
But you're not getting paid for your work.
No, I'm not getting paid to give a particular opinion in court.
And that's because this case can get you exposure and publicity.
Yes, this could bring my expertise into the public eye.
Right, and this could help you achieve your personal goal of leading the CDC one day, right?
Yes, it could help with that, and it could help educate other people too.
So let's talk about your conclusion in today's case. you concluded that Dr. Davis did not follow the proper standard of care, right?
Correct.
So let's talk about that standard of care. The first prong is that a longer course of opioids can be prescribed if the physician schedules follow-ups with the patient, right?
Yes, that is standard of care.
You'd agree with me, Dr. Davis had follow-up scheduled for all 3 injuries.
Yes, he did have some follow-up appointments, but still his length of prescription was way too long.
Well, let's talk about that. You believe that Dr. Davis shouldn't have renewed the prescription, right?
Well, I believe that he shouldn't have renewed it, or she shouldn't have renewed it for another 30 days.
Right, and you believe they should have conducted urine tests and checked for adrenal insufficiency, correct?
Yes, after Sloan finished up his prescription early, that should have been one of the things that Dr. Davis did.
But Dr. Kaswani, isn't that only recommended for patients who've been taking Vicodin for over a year?
Yes, that is true. But in this case, with in this particular circumstance, with the length of the prescription and signs of substance abuse, that should have been one of Dr. Davis's reactions.
Well, doesn't the standard also say if there is high dosages, the follow-up should, well, the test should be every 3 months, correct?
Yes.
But at that time, Sloan wasn't even taking that medication for over 2 months, right?
Yes.
So
I think at this point when you're talking about.
yes, let's talk about the medical history forms. You'd agree with me that the standard of care states that a physician should provide the patient with a form or a questionnaire, correct?
Yes, to assess patient risk factors.
Right, and this form should ask for patient medical history, family medical history, and social history.
Yes.
And
those are 3 of the big ones.
Dr. Davis gives such a form to Mr. Thomas, didn't he?
Yes, she did.
So, and you'd agree with me that this form met the standard of care.
Yes, this form met the bare minimum that it could have been clearer. Dr. Davis could have verbally confirmed answers that would have made it much better, but it did.
Unfairly prejudicial under 403. May I be heard?
Well, you're objecting to a question you asked.
I asked about the medical history forms and whether they met the standard of care. The witness responded to something that was best practice about oral confirmation. Again, this goes to best practice, and under O'Neill v. Howie Medical Center, it states that the defendant only has to establish the standard of care.
Mr. Reynolds, would you like to respond?
I have no response, Your Honor, in light of your previous ruling.
Okay. In this case, the answer exceeds the scope of the question. So the last part of the answer is stricken.
Yes.
Next question. Doctor, if you would please try to just stay with the question. The attorneys will get all the questions out.
Yes, thank you.
So I want to take a closer look at this medical history form. Permission to screen share what has been admitted as Exhibit 5B1.
Yes, ma'am.
So, Dr. Kaswani, if my co-counsel could zoom into the bottom part. Yes. Read in your head as I read aloud. I certify no changes to my medical history since March 16th, 2017. Signed, Sloan Thomas, right?
Yes, that is what it says.
And this was certified in December 1st of 2017, correct?
Yes, it was.
So just to clarify, Mr. Thomas didn't note any changes to his medical history during the December visit, right?
Yes.
So I want to focus on another section, the social history portion. Specifically, the question that goes, any history of alcohol, drug, or painful abuse. So in December, Mr. Thomas hadn't updated his form to reflect that he went to drug rehab, right?
No, unfortunately, he didn't update that.
And he didn't update his time about when he struggled with painful abuse, right?
No, unfortunately, he didn't.
And during this visit, Dr. Davis did have a conversation with Mr. Thomas.
Yes, I would assume so.
And he still didn't say or tell Dr. Davis about that.
I mean, I don't know what specifically was said in those meetings, but I guess I assume not. I don't know.
Well, you did review Dr. Davis's affidavit, right?
Yes.
And that Dr. Davis doesn't say anything about Mr. Thomas notifying him about their time in drug rehab or struggles with the Vicodin HP pills, right?
No, it doesn't say anything in there about it.
Thank you for your time. I have nothing further, Your Honor.
Okay. Thank you, Doctor. Appreciate your time. Council will just take a minute to do the evaluation, and then we'll go to the next. Okay. Judges, are we good? Okay. Who's next?
Yes, Your Honor. The plaintiff calls Dallas Dixon to the stand.
Okay,
Permission to proceed?
granted.
Good afternoon. Please introduce yourself to the court.
What's up? The name's Dallas Dixon.
And why are you here in court today?
Well, I was actually best buds with Sloan Thomas. We played video games all the time. I would actually call him my slow bro because I did track and he didn't.
And when did you first meet Sloan?
I met him when I moved over from UR on a track scholarship, and I was housed in the athletes only housing. Sloan was there too, so we became pretty good friends once I figured out that he played Madden, arguably one of the best video games ever made. But anyway, after I figured that out, we became really good friends.
Are you familiar with Vicodin at all?
Yeah, my sister had some after an ACL surgery, and she really seemed to change after taking it, more unstable, if you know what I mean. And I also knew some guys at college who took it because they thought it made them happy, though usually they just looked miserable. So when I saw Sloan taking it, I was really worried for him.
And would you recognize a photo of some Vicodin if I were to show it to you?
Yes, I would.
Your Honor, let the record reflect my co-counsel's screen sharing what has been pre-marked as Exhibit 1.
Any objection from the defense? No objection. Okay,
Objection, Your Honor. Sorry.
that's okay.
Mr. Dixon, do you recognize this?
Yes, I do.
Could you tell the court what this is?
Yeah, it's a photo of Vicodin pills in a Vicodin bottle.
Your Honor, at this time, the plaintiff moves to enter what has been pre-marked as Exhibit 1 into evidence.
No objection to this time, Your Honor.
Okay, without objection, that'll be entered.
Now, Mr. Dixon, are these pills similar to the pills that Sloan had in 2017?
Yeah, the little white pills with the Vicodin HP on them, that's definitely looks like what he had.
And do you know why Sloan had the Vicodin?
I figured out he got it from his doc, Dr. David.
Now, as far as you could tell, did Sloan seem to be affected by this Vicodin?
Let's see. Well, after a few weeks of figuring out that he had the Vicodin, I noticed that he had started to seem seemed like he was more anxious and stuff. But at first I assumed it was from stress, from missing practice, because he had his basketball injury. But I began to wonder if, it was from the pills. It was kind of obvious that it wasn't from stress.
Now, I'd like to talk about the year 2017. Did you and Sloan hang out much that summer?
Yeah, we hung out a little bit that summer.
Okay. Now, did you ever see Sloan take any medication then?
Yeah, one time while I was at his house in June 2017, we were playing Madden, and he still had Vicodin pills, even though he had been injured a couple months before. And at one point, he grabbed his shoulder like it hurt, and he took some off the dresser, and he took a Vicodin pill. And when he saw me looking at the pill bottle that only had a few left, he started asking me if I knew where to get more Vicodin pills.
Did you know how to get more?
No, I didn't. And I told him so. I told him I was worried about him. I'd had a similar experience with my sister,
Okay. And when did you next see Sloan?
Let's see. I was back at his house a few days later playing Madden again, and he had another bottle that had more pills in it. And I started wondering about it, but then his mom popped in.
And what did she do?
Well, she seemed really frustrated when she saw the bottle, and she grabbed him and she pulled him out of the room, and I could hear them arguing in the other room.
Could you hear what they were saying?
Not at first, but detective work, I like to think of it as my kind of unofficial hobby, if you know what I mean. So I try to keep my eyes and ears open. So maybe I got up, maybe I walked a little closer to the door. Anyway, what I did hear was Sloan say, "Those are prescription, come on." And I was curious about that. So I looked at the bottle, and they were prescription, but they were not for my slow bro.
Okay. And did you stay at Sloan's house after this?
Oh, well, it was really awkward, and I felt like I should leave, but I was in the middle of a Madden game against the hardest CPU. So I finished the game, and then I snuck to the door and left.
Okay, I'd like to move on to Sloan's last injury. When was this?
That was November 30th, 2017.
Okay, and did you see him take any more medication after he got injured then?
Yeah, when he got the pills, next time I saw him, he was popping Vicodin pills like candy.
And did this seem to have an effect on him?
Yeah, like before, he started to seem to get kind of anxious, if you know what I mean.
And did he again ask you if you knew how to get more?
Tragically, he did.
Now, earlier you said you didn't know how to get more Vicodin, but was this still the case when he asked you again?
No, because of my detective work being my unofficial hobby, tragically, I'd heard a rumor about this guy that would be at the New Year's Eve party. It was a costume party at college, and I'd heard he'd be selling Vicodin pills. And I didn't want to tell Sloan, but I think he saw it in my eyes. So he seemed so desperate. I eventually did tell him.
Now, Mr. Dixon, we have to talk a bit about this New Year's Eve party. Did you and Sloan both go?
Yeah, we both went. It was a costume party. I was in my epic Snoopy suit. Sloan was in his basketball costume. Apparently, he couldn't think of anything better. Anyway, yeah, we both went.
Do you know if he got any Vicodin at the party?
No, but around 11:30, he came into the room where I was playing Madden, and he showed me a bag full of what looked like Vicodin. And I don't know if he took any, but given what happened that night, I think he did.
Do you know when he took Vicodin?
No, but after midnight sometime, I heard some screaming in the other room. And so I ran over and I looked in, and Sloan, he was on the ground and someone was shaking him, trying to wake him up.
Did he wake up?
No. I tried to do CPR on him. Like a fool, I didn't even know how to do CPR, so I looked it up on my phone, and I couldn't get him to wake up. And when the EMTs arrived, I don't think he was breathing.
Thank you, Mr. Dixon. Your Honor, no further questions at this time.
Okay. Mr. Dixon, do you need a minute before we do some more questions, or are you gonna be okay?
If you could just give me a moment, actually.
Okay.
Sorry.
Okay. Counsel, do you have any questions for this witness?
I do, Your Honor.
Okay.
Mr. Dixon, I want to begin by saying that I'm sorry for your loss. And if
Thank
at
you.
any time in this exam you need a moment to just catch your breath, just tell me, okay?
Thank you so much.
Now, you mentioned your sister on direct examination. Now, you noticed when she was taking Vicodin, she was moody, right?
Yeah.
And she decided to just throw out all her pills when she had symptoms of addiction, right?
Yes, she did.
Now, I want to talk about your friendship with Sloan. You were good friends, right?
Like pepperoni and pizza.
Slow bros. I get it.
Yeah, of course. He was the slow one, actually, but yeah.
You decided to leave the University of Richmond after his death, right?
Yeah, I couldn't stand it anymore.
Part of what made it so painful is that you feel responsible for what happened to him.
In part,
Objection,
yes.
Your Honor. Relevance. May I be heard?
Okay.
Yes, Your Honor. Whether or not Mr. Dixon feels responsible for his friend's death has no bearing on today's case.
May I respond, Your Honor?
Yes, sir.
Your Honor, relevance first off is a low bar, and I'm using this to show the bias of the witness in testifying. He feels guilty, and that might be a reason why he's testifying for the plaintiff in today's trial.
I think it can go to bias, and I think it is part of what we have to determine today as to what would the direct cause was. I'm going to allow the question.
Yes, Your
Continue,
Honor.
Mr. Dixon, you feel responsible for what happened to Sloan, right?
In part, but whenever I start thinking about that, I always tell myself I'm not the one who prescribed him the pain meds in the first place.
Well, I want to talk about those pain meds that Sloan was taking. In spring of 2017, you saw him taking Vicodin, right?
Yeah.
Now, you saw him, when you were with him one day, you saw that he had a bottle of Vicodin that had someone else's name on it.
Yeah.
You heard him yelling out in the hallway to his mother that they were prescriptions, right?
Yeah, that's what he said.
Now, Mr. Dixon, you learned later that Sloan had been sent to rehab, didn't you?
Yeah, when the next semester started, I did figure that out at one point.
But even after going to rehab, you did see Sloan drinking alcohol, right?
No.
Mr. Dixon, is it your testimony that after Sloan went to rehab, he never drank alcohol again?
He had some beers at some points, but I honestly don't remember if he drank them.
Then I'll rephrase. You remember seeing him with alcohol, correct?
Yeah, though often when we went to parties, he just had soda. He was kind of a straight and narrow kind of guy, if you know what I mean.
Now, Mr. Reynolds on direct examination showed you Exhibit 1. That was a pill bottle. Your Honor, permission for my co-counsel to screen share that?
Granted.
Give them a second, Your Honor. Sorry. Now, Mr. Dixon, on the label of the bottle, it says, when taking this medication, do not drink alcoholic beverages, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Now, I want to talk about the night that you and Sloan went to go get pizza. You and him were talking. Sloan asked you if you knew where he could find some more Vicodin, right?
Yeah.
You decided to tell him that he could find some at a New Year's Eve party.
Yeah, I eventually did tell him.
I'm sorry, Mr. Dixon, but we have to talk about the night that he died. You and him went to this party together, right?
Yeah.
When you told him about the party, he said, this will be a way I can celebrate my 21st birthday early, right?
Yeah, he was pretty excited about that.
Now, Mr. Dixon, you didn't spend the whole night with Sloan, did you?
No, he was He was in one room getting everyone laughing, and I was in another room playing Madden, not really getting everyone laughing. He was pretty popular.
And I saw Sloan with some beers at the party, didn't you?
Yeah,
Later on in the night, he came up to you with a bag of Vicodin.
it looked like Vicodin.
Mr. Dixon, after choosing to go to this party, Sloan Thomas died, right?
Yeah,
Mr. Dixon, you can't forgive yourself for telling him about the party, right?
no, but like I said, I wasn't the one who prescribed him pain meds in the first place.
But you feel responsible for what happened, correct?
In part,
Mr. Dixon, I'm sorry for your loss. At
thank
this
you.
time, the defense has nothing further, Your Honor.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Dixon. You can step down.
Your Honor, a brief redirect.
Okay.
Yes, Your Honor. Now,
Hold on a second, Mr. Dixon. Council's got a couple more questions for you.
I'm sorry, Mr. Nixon, I'll make this brief. Now, when you saw the pill bottles that Sloan had, did you ever read the warning labels that were on them?
No,
Thank you. No further questions, Your Honor. I asked my witness be allowed to step down from the virtual stand.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Dixon. You can step down now. We're going to take a minute just to do the evaluations. Starting to realize that I take the longest to do the evaluations. So I'm presuming my co-judges are all ready. Is there another witness for the petitioners, for the plaintiff?
No, Your Honor, the plaintiff rests its case in chief.
Okay. Normally at this time, I take about a 5-minute break in order to let everyone use the facilities if they need to do that. Does that sound like a good idea to everyone?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right.
Yes, Your Honor.
According to my watch, I have 3:06. Why don't we come back at 3:15? It's a little bit more than 5 minutes, but just in case. Thank you all. We're in recess till 3:15. According to my watch, we have about a minute left to let everyone get back, counsel. So just relax for one more minute and then we'll get right to you.
Yes, Your Honor.
My judge is doing all right.
We just have to score. You have to do multiple tasks.
Well, you know, it's what I do every day, so it comes a little bit easy.
Oh, that's good.
All right, I think it's 3:15. Let's see if everyone's back. Counsel for the defense, counsel for the plaintiff. Okay.
Yes, Your Honor.
So counsel for the plaintiff, you've concluded your case in chief, is that correct?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay. The defense have any witnesses for us today?
Yes, Your Honor. At this time, we'd like to call Dr. Arya Davis to the stand.
Okay. Dr. Davis, you've previously been sworn. Please answer counsel's question. You may proceed, counsel.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Could you introduce yourself to the jury?
My name is Dr. Arya Davis.
Dr. Davis, why are you here?
I'm here today to talk about one of my former patients, Sloan Thomas, and the care that I gave him.
Before we talk more about the case, I want the jury to know about your qualifications. What do you do for a living?
I'm currently an orthopedic surgeon at the Richmond Sports Medicine Center, or RSMC as some people know it as, and I've been practicing there for 10 years.
Oh. Can you tell us about your educational background?
Yes, of course. I earned my BSPH in Health Policy and Management from UNC Chapel Hill in 1997. I then went on to the East Carolina Brody School of Medicine in 2002 to earn my MD. And after that, I did a 5-year residency in orthopedic surgery at Duke University.
Wow. Tell us about your work experience in this field.
While I'm an orthopedic surgeon at the Richmond Sports Medicine Center, I also hold a faculty position at the University of Richmond School of Medicine.
So let's talk about Mr. Thomas. How many times did you provide him care?
I provided Mr. Thomas care on various occasions, but there were 3 visits that really stood out to me.
So let's talk about those 3 visits one at a time. When was the first time that you met Mr. Thomas?
The first time that I met Sloan was on February 6th of 2013 when he came into my office with a basketball injury.
Can you tell the jury about what happened during this visit?
Yes, of course. Sloan came into my office and he said that he hurt his ankle. So I had him fill out a medical history form, and after that I examined him, and I actually found that he had fractured his right ankle. So I prescribed him a 7-day course of Vicodin HP.
You mentioned a medical history form. If I were to show it to you, would you be able to recognize it?
Yes, I would.
On a permission to screen share what has been pre-marked as Exhibit 5A1.
Granted.
Dr. Davis, what is this?
That would be Sloan's first medical history form.
And who filled out the information on this form?
That would be Sloan Thomas and also his parent, Cameron Thomas.
Is this a fair and accurate depiction of that medical history?
Yes, it is.
At this time, we'd like to offer Exhibit 5A1 into evidence.
Hearing no objection, it's admitted.
So, Dr. Davis, were you able to review this form?
Yes, I was.
Could you tell us what you found while reviewing this?
While reviewing this form, there was nothing on it that suggested that I shouldn't prescribe Vicodin HP to Sloan at the time. As you can see on the screen, there's the family medical history section. And in that section, it only lists high blood pressure and high cholesterol.
So let's talk about that second injury. When was the next time you saw Mr. Thomas?
The next time that I saw Mr. Thomas in my office was on March 16th of 2017.
Could you tell us what happened?
Yes, of course. Sloan came into my office with more basketball injuries. This time he said it was his left shoulder. So I had him fill out another medical history form and I examined him. After examining him this time, I found that he actually tore his left rotator cuff. So I performed surgery on him a few days later. And after the surgery, I prescribed him a 30-day course of Vicodin HP.
You mentioned another medical history form. Permission to screen share what has been entered as Exhibit 5B1.
That'll be granted.
Dr. Davis, were you able to review this form?
Yes, I was.
So could you tell us what you found while reviewing it?
While reviewing this form, again, there was nothing on it that suggested that I shouldn't prescribe Vicodin HP to Sloan. It was actually almost identical to the first form that was filled out. And again, in the family medical history section, it only listed high blood pressure and high cholesterol.
So, were you here for the course of this trial?
Yes, I was.
Were you here to hear Ms. Thomas testify?
Yes, I was.
And did you hear her testify that her family has a history with substance abuse?
I did hear her say that, and considering that she didn't put any of the information on the form about that, that just really alarmed me in a way.
Let's get that up on the screen. Permission to screen share both exhibits 5A1 and 5B1.
Okay.
So, Dr. Davis, could you elaborate on what you mean by it alarmed you?
Yes, of course. There were actually two sections where Mrs. Thomas and Sloan could have put this information. They could have either put it in the family medical history section or the social history section.
And what did they indicate in either of the sections?
As you can see in the social history section, they said no to any history of alcohol, drug, or pain pill abuse.
And just to clarify, when was the first time you heard about their family history with addiction?
It was today in court.
With that in mind, let's talk about that third visit. When was the next time you treated Mr. Thomas?
The next time that I treated Sloan was on December 1st of 2017.
Could you tell us what happened during this visit?
Yes, of course. Sloan came into my office with more injuries. This time he had re-injured his left shoulder, and he also had a new injury to his right ankle.
So, similar to the previous visits, did Mr. Thomas ever fill out a medical history for this one?
He actually didn't. He just initialed the last form that he filled out.
I want to take a closer look at that. Permission to screen share what has been entered as Exhibit 5B1.
Granted.
So, Dr. Davis, where does Sloan indicate there were no changes?
At the bottom of the form, it says, I certify that there have been no changes to my medical history since 3/16 of 2017. And as you can see, under it is Sloan Thomas's signature.
Did you hear Ms. Thomas say that her son was in rehab?
Yes, I did hear her say that.
And did you ever know Mr. Thomas went to drug rehab?
No, I didn't. I did receive a call from Cameron Thomas back in June stating that Sloan started rehab. But considering that I prescribed physical rehab for Sloan the month prior, I just assumed that it was that.
Thank you for your time today. I have nothing further, Your Honor.
Okay. Please answer the other counsel's questions as well, Doctor. Yes, ma'am.
Permission to proceed with cross-examination, Your Honor.
Granted.
Good afternoon, Dr. Davis.
Good afternoon.
You'd say that high-quality patient care is your #1 priority at your clinic, right?
Yes, I do.
Okay. And so in trying to reach that goal, you implemented a rating system, right?
Yes, I did.
Okay. And in this rating system, it's a rating system from 1 to 5 stars, right?
Yes, it is.
Okay. And you conducted a study to see what would raise the rating, right?
Yes.
Okay. And in this study, you recognized that the more your colleagues prescribed Vicodin HP, the more 5-star reviews they got, right?
Yes, I did see that actually. And considering that I had seen that in my own father's care when he had
Objection, Your Honor. Relevance, may I be heard?
Are you objecting to the question or the answer?
I'm objecting to question, Your Honor.
Okay.
Your Honor,
So-
may I respond?
Well, I didn't hear what she wants to say yet.
Yes,
Yes.
Your Honor, sorry.
This would be irrelevant in today's case, as under Heath v. Milliam Medical Center, it states that the defendant's motive or intent is irrelevant under Rule 403. Therefore, talking about the rating system does go to the defendant's motive or intent, which makes this evidence irrelevant.
Your Honor, may I respond to that?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, Your Honor. In asking these questions, we are showing not what the defendant's motives necessarily would be, but all the things she took in consideration when prescribing this medication. In fact, it will this questioning will show that she started prescribing more Vicodin herself in general as a practice at her clinic. And we just want to show that this does not follow the standard of care, that she would start prescribing more Vicodins merely because of the 5-star reviews. So it's not going to motive, but to the standard of care that she did not follow what a reasonable doctor would do.
Your Honor, may I respond?
Yes, ma'am.
What Ms. Kelly said, she said that this goes to show that this would prove why she prescribes more Vicodin. That goes to the defendant's intent. This is why this testimony is irrelevant under Heath v. Milliam Medical Center, as the defendant's motive or intent in this case is irrelevant under 403.
Well, counsel, let me help me understand what you're saying. You're saying that the only reason that she prescribed Vicodin was because of some report that was out there?
Your Honor, not precisely, Your Honor. What I'm saying is that Dr. Davis started changing her practice at her clinic once she saw that this rating system showed that Vicodin gave their clinic more 5-star reviews. And therefore, yes, Your Honor, that would have been during her time at the clinic. I don't believe there's an exact timeline, but it would have been a couple years, or within a couple years of this incident, Your Honor.
Your Honor, may I
That's the problem, counsel. How can I consider that, or how can the jury consider that? It may have happened after this case happened, and then it would have no relevance at all.
Oh, Your Honor, it did happen before this incident happened, as she did include it in her affidavit and said that in her time before working with Sloan, that she did implement this rating system and conducted this study and started prescribing more Vicodin.
Your Honor, may I respond to that?
Okay.
The rating system in today's case is irrelevant. As opposing counsel said, she's laying these foundation to show that Dr. Davis's intent or motive to prescribe Vicodin is to make her ratings higher. And under Heath v. Milliam Medical Center, the defendant's motive or intent is not relevant under Rule 403, which makes this entire line of questioning irrelevant.
Your Honor, may I respond?
No, I think it goes to the weight. It goes to the weight of the evidence. And the fact of the matter is, unless you can hook it up with that there should not have been any painkillers done in this case, then counsel's right. Why she's using this as opposed to something else is really not relevant. At this time, unless you can hook it up very quickly, it would not be relevant at this time. Let's have a new question.
Yes, Your Honor. Dr. Davis, the use of Vicodin is actually debated in your field, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
And that's because your colleagues are worried about the side effects of it, correct?
Yes, they are, but I actually recognize the benefits of prescribing Vicodin to patients.
Okay, we'll get to that in a moment. But right now I'm talking about your colleagues. They're worried about the potential for addiction, right?
Yes, they are, but addiction really does come with any other opioid drug.
Okay, but with Vicodin, even if your patient follows the prescribed amount, there is still a possibility for addiction, right?
Yes, there is, just like any other opioid on the market.
All right. Now, when Sloan came to you in 2017, you prescribed him a course of Vicodin, right?
Yes, I did.
Okay, and that was for 180 pills, right?
Yes, it was.
Okay, and so he called you up 3 weeks later, didn't he?
He did.
Okay. And on that phone call, he said he had run out of Vicodin pills, right?
He did say that.
Okay. And so you made sure to call him in and check up on him and make sure that he was doing okay, right?
No, I did not call Sloan into my office. In the phone call that Sloan left, well, in the voicemail that Sloan left me, he did explain his reasons for needing more Vicodin at the time. So I did decide to prescribe him more.
Well, just to clarify, he used up his prescription early, right?
Yes, he did, but I also did warn him not to use up his prescription early again, and I reminded him that he had a bright future.
Okay, so you reminded him he had a bright future and then gave him another 180 pills, right?
Yes, I did, considering that I knew he was in an immense amount of pain, and I could understand why he wanted this prescription of Vicodin.
Okay, but you weren't concerned about the fact that he used up his prescription early?
I did note that he finished his prescription early, but like I said before, I did remind him to only take the proper dosage that I assigned to him.
Okay, well, at the next appointment, he appeared moody and anxious, right?
Yes, he did.
Okay, and these are possible side effects of being addicted to Vicodin, right?
Yes, they are, but Sloan also noted on his medical history form that his pain was a 10+. So I saw those signs as symptoms of his pain at that time.
Okay, but just to clarify, you didn't even do any tests to make sure that he wasn't addicted, right?
Objection, Your Honor.
What's the objection?
Prejudicial under Rule 403. May I be heard?
Nope, that one is overruled. It certainly is fair game. Yes,
Let
ma'am.
me repeat the question, Dr. Davis. You didn't even conduct any tests to double check that he wasn't possibly addicted, right?
No, I did not at the time.
Well, you didn't at any time, did you?
No, I did not, because the symptoms that Sloan was experiencing, I did relate them back to his pain in that moment.
In that moment, okay. Well, you prescribed him another 180 pills, right?
Yes, I did, considering that his previous injury wouldn't have been fully healed at the time.
All right. And at the next appointment, well, Sloan actually didn't show up, did he?
No, he did not.
So you made sure to call him up immediately to check up on him, right?
No, I didn't, but I did receive a call from Cameron Thomas saying that Sloan had started rehab. And considering that I prescribed physical rehab for Sloan back in May, that's what I assumed he went to.
Well, and I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the day he didn't show up. You didn't call up his parent to make sure he was okay, did you?
No, Sloan wasn't shy about telling me when he wasn't showing up to appointments before. So I just assumed that he would, come into his next appointment.
Dr. Davis, are you saying that Sloan didn't show up to previous appointments?
This was the only appointment that Sloan didn't show up to.
Okay, so but you said he wasn't shy about letting you know when he wouldn't show up. Just to clarify, he hadn't shown up before, right?
He wasn't shy about asking for more Vicodin. That's what I meant. I'm sorry about that.
Okay, so the next time that Sloan showed up, you prescribed him more Vicodin, right?
Yes, I did.
And that was another 180 pills, right?
Yes, it was.
Okay. And correct me if I'm wrong, but 180 pills 4 times, that's 720 pills of Vicodin, right?
Yes, but I didn't prescribe it.
Dr. Davis, is it your testimony you did not prescribe Vicodin to Sloan Thomas?
It was actually 540 pills, not 740.
Excuse me, 540 pills of Vicodin. That adds up to 540 pills, right?
Yes, in total, not just at this one appointment.
All right. Thank you. No further questions, Your Honor.
Okay.
Your Honor, may I redirect?
Yes, ma'am.
So, Dr. Davis, every time you had to prescribe Mr. Thomas Vicodin, who requested for it?
It was actually Sloan Thomas, but when he did request it, I did give him proper warnings about the drug.
And Did he ever prescribe him or recommend him any other medication than Vicodin HP?
Yes, I actually recommended him NSAIDs and Advil at one time.
And what did Mr. Thomas ask you?
It was Sloan's choice to ask me for more Vicodin.
Thank you for your time today. I have nothing further, Your Honor.
Okay, thank you, doctor. You may step down. Are there any further witnesses for the defense?
Your Honor, at this time, the defense calls Chris Canary to the stand.
Okay. You may proceed.
Could you introduce yourself to the members of the jury?
Hi, my name is Chris Canary. I'm the Director of Rehabilitation Therapy at the Four Seasons Recovery Center.
Could you tell the members of the jury what you do as a part of your job?
I work with patients that struggle with addiction, meeting with them in intensive one-on-one sessions. At Four Seasons, we emphasize the importance of taking responsibility for your actions.
Now, Ms. Canary, how did you know Sloan Thomas?
Sloan was one of our patients at Four Seasons before he passed. He first came to us in March of 2017 for an addiction to Vicodin HP.
So could you tell the jury, to your knowledge, how exactly Sloan ended up in your care?
Well, Sloan didn't come on his own. His mother, Cameron Thomas, brought him in at around 9 p.m. on June 6th. We normally don't accept patients on such a short notice, but someone had dropped out that afternoon, so we were able to welcome Sloan.
So you mentioned that it wasn't Sloan's choice to go to rehab. With that in mind, could you tell the jury how he was acting in those first few days?
Yes, well, given that it wasn't Sloan's choice, Sloan was giving us the cold shoulder at first, though that's not unusual for new patients. Many patients, even when they hit rock bottom, are just scared of the hard work that comes with overcoming their addiction.
And during those first few days, did you make any other observations about Sloan?
Yes, I noted that he was experiencing withdrawal symptoms, like pain in his muscles and bones, difficulty sleeping, and nausea and vomiting.
So you mentioned that Sloan was reserved in these first few days. Did he ever begin to open up to you at all?
Yes, Sloan began to open up by the fourth day when we came to some important breakthroughs. Sloan agreed that it was his choice to take more than his doctor, Dr. Davis, had prescribed, and to get more pills from his college friends after he ran out. He agreed that he should have talked to Dr. Davis about his pain instead of exceeding his prescription.
So after this breakthrough, how's Sloan responding to your treatment?
Well, eventually, Sloan became a model patient. The staff and I were positive that Sloan would make a smooth transition back into society. That isn't to say that transitioning is easy or that Sloan's battle with addiction would be over as soon as he left. Addiction is a tough battle, and he was going to have to work hard to make the right choices to stay clean.
And when did Sloan leave the recovery center?
Sloan left on August 5th when his mother came to pick him up and take him back to the University of Richmond where he was attending.
And what do you and your staff have to do before you can discharge patients?
I hold exit interviews for all of our patients before they leave Four Seasons.
And is it uncommon for your patients to relapse after they leave the recovery center?
Unfortunately, it's not uncommon. Around 1 in 4 of our patients do end up relapsing, but there's a lot that goes into a relapse. Even the smallest event can trigger one.
So I want to talk about Sloan Thomas's exit interview. What exactly did you and him go over?
Well, as a part of his discharge plan, I told Sloan that he would still be susceptible to environmental triggers like parties, so he should stay away from alcohol. I also told him that he should avoid doctors that might prescribe more opioid prescriptions in the future.
So you mentioned that Sloan should avoid alcohol. Did you and him ever talk about alcohol before this?
Yes. During Sloan's time at Four Seasons, it was July 5th when he told me that he rarely drank. But that was a different story than what I'd heard from his small group counselor. When I questioned Sloan further, he told me that he felt the need to act like he drank more because he was a college student.
So, Miss Canary, what did you do about this?
Honestly, I didn't do much of anything. I did make a note to question him further, but I never did.
So, Miss Canary, did you give Sloan anything at this exit interview?
Yes, I strongly encourage Sloan to sign a release form which would allow us, the counselors, to let his physicians know about his addiction.
And did he sign this form?
No, he said that he was worried that it would risk his MBA career, which he was working on.
Do you keep in touch with your patients after they leave the recovery center?
Yes, we keep in touch with our patients 6 months after they leave on a weekly basis. For Sloan, that would have been from August when he left to January.
Was he keeping these appointments?
Well, he was at first, but by December, he completely stopped responding, saying that he was too busy.
Miss Canary, how did you find out about Sloan Thomas's death?
I found out from a news article that Sloan overdosed on Vicodin.
Objection, Your Honor. Hearsay, may I be heard?
Okay,
Yes, Your Honor. The witness just referenced an out-of-court statement in a news article offered for the truth, and this would be hearsay.
well, is there a question that he died?
No, Your Honor. But regardless, this is still hearsay, as this is an unconfirmed and not necessarily truthful source that is regardless being offered for the truth.
May I respond, Your Honor?
Okay,
First off, you asked counsel if this was disputed, and it's not. And under Rule 807, which is the residual exception, evidence that is deemed trustworthy can be admitted into evidence. Everyone in today's case agrees that Sloan Thomas died.
Your Honor, may I respond to that?
briefly.
Yes, Your Honor. This evidence offered in here was not whether or not Sloan died, but the witness also added a qualifier as to how he died. As to the 807 response, if everybody agreed as to how he died, we would not be here in court today. Therefore, this is inadmissible hearsay.
May I give one more response, Your Honor?
Well, I don't think I need any more counsel, but thank you. There's no question, because we've already seen the autopsy report that says he died from a combination of alcohol and amphetamine. And opiates. So there's no question about that. The problem is, why is it relevant how she found out or what the effect was on her? How does that help me with this case?
Is that a question for me, Your Honor?
Yes, sir. You were the one that asked the question.
Your Honor, we're using this to show that this witness has knowledge, or we're using this to show the jury that Sloan died of a Vicodin overdose that was mixed with alcohol, Your Honor.
Wrong witness for that. Have your next question.
All right. Ms. Canary, you've been in court for today's trial, right?
Yes,
You were here, you saw the autopsy report for Sloan, didn't you?
yes, I did.
Now, what caused Sloan's death?
Well, I saw that Sloan overdosed on Vicodin and that it had something to do with alcohol.
Thank you for your time today, Ms. Canary. The defense has nothing further at this point.
Okay.
Permission to proceed with cross-examination, Your Honor?
Yes, sir.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Now, I'd like to talk a bit about your private sessions with Sloan. During the first few sessions, he was rather unresponsive, isn't that right?
That's correct, but he started to open up by the 4th day.
That's right. And in this 4th day, in the session on that day, you discovered that he had been prescribed a week-long course of Vicodin in 2013.
Yes,
And this was the defendant's prescription.
yes, it was.
You also learned in the same session that later in 2017, Dr. Davis prescribed Sloan a 30-day course of Vicodin.
Yes, and it was refilled twice at Sloan's request.
That is correct. And based off of your experience with this, how do you believe this related to Sloan's addiction?
Well, I believe that while it was Dr. Davis's prescription that exposed Sloan to Vicodin HP, It was Sloan's choice to take more than what was prescribed and to get more pills after he ran out, which ultimately led to Sloan's addiction.
But do you specifically believe that the double extensions had anything to do with Sloan's addiction?
Yes, I believe that it was a precipitating factor to his addiction.
I see. Okay, thank
But-
you. Now, you would say that Four Seasons frequently admits addicted patients from offices similar to the RSMC, right?
Yes,
And this is because such offices often prescribe higher amounts of addictive pain medication.
yes,
And Dr. Davis is a part of the RSMC, right?
yes, but I've never actually had any patients from Dr. Davis before.
Okay, but it would lead to follow that Dr. Davis follows similar practices.
Well, I
Okay.
wouldn't.
Unfair prejudice as to these as to the rating system.
The objection-
Your Honor,
the
may I
objection
respond?
is- Counsel, the objection is sustained. She said that she has never received any patients of this doctor before. So what her other colleagues are doing is not relevant at this time. What's your next question?
Very well, Your Honor. Now, Ms. Guarnieri, prior to his discharge from rehab, you and Sloan had a final discussion, right?
That's right. We had an exit interview.
That's right. And as you said on direct, you talked with him about the things he should avoid.
Yes,
And specifically, like you said on direct, you recommended that he avoid doctors who prescribed high amounts of addictive medication.
yes, and I provided him a list, but I didn't include any sports medicine doctors on that list.
I see. And you also told him to consider avoiding Dr. Davis specifically.
Not Dr. Davis specifically, no.
But you told him, but Sloan, up till now, Sloan had been seeing Dr. Davis, right?
Yes, he had been.
I see. Now, of course, naturally, you're familiar with the dosages that physicians prescribe for medications like Vicodin, right?
That's correct. It comes naturally with working at a facility where we work with recovering patients of addictions.
Would you please tell the court what the maximum dosage is that physicians prescribe for Vicodin?
Yes, it would be 4 to 6 pills per day.
Isn't it 1 pill every 4 hours, which equates to 6 pills per day?
Yes,
Okay, thank you. And Dr. Davis told Sloan to take this prescription for the starting prescription, right?
that's correct. And Sloan's choice to take more than what was prescribed increased his risk of addiction.
I see, but he also told him to take this dosage for the extension, right?
Yes,
And for the extension after that.
that's correct.
Thank you. No further questions at this time, Your Honor.
May I
Okay.
redirect the witness?
You may.
Now, on cross-examination, you said that you had told Sloan to avoid Dr. Davis. Were you ever able to warn Dr. Davis about Sloan's time in rehab?
No, I wasn't even really telling Sloan to avoid Dr. Davis specifically. I never worked with any of Dr. Davis's patients before, and I wouldn't know him to say how he prescribes opioids or any kinds of prescriptions.
And finally, you were asked a question on cross-examination about what caused Sloan's addiction, and I don't believe you were able to finish your answer. So in spring of 2017, what choices did Sloan make that led to him going to the rehab facility?
Yes, well, while it was Dr. Davis's prescription which exposed Sloan to Vicodin HP, it was ultimately Sloan's choice to take more than what was prescribed, which I believe ultimately led to his addiction.
Thank you for your time today, Ms. Guarnieri. The defense has nothing further.
Okay.
Your Honor, a brief recross.
Okay, just on what was done on redirect.
Yes, Your Honor. Ms. Guarnieri, to be clear, you do believe that the double extension that Dr. Davis prescribed was the precipitating factor in Sloan Thomas's addiction.
That's right, it's precipitating. And of course, there's another factor that goes into it. Addiction is a two-way street. While Dr. Davis's prescription exposed Sloan to Vicodin HP, it was also Sloan's choices that led to his addiction.
Thank you for that. But directing you back to my question, Sloan's addiction, you believe would not have happened if he had not been prescribed that double extension. You believe that was the main cause of his addiction.
No, I believe that it was a precipitating factor.
Thank you. No further questions, Your Honor.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. You may step down. Okay. How my judges doing? Okay. Any further witnesses for the defense?
Yes, Your Honor. At this time, we would like to call Dr. Skylar Venkatasan to the stand.
Okay.
May I proceed, Your Honor?
Yep.
Good afternoon. Could you please introduce yourself to the court?
Good afternoon. My name is Dr. Skylar Venkatasan.
Why are you here today?
I'm here to provide my professional opinions and conclusions regarding Dr. Davis, the standard of care, and the care that she gave Sloan Thomas.
Before we get into that conclusion, I'd like to talk about your expertise. What do you currently do?
Well, I'm currently an orthopedic surgeon practicing in Jacksonville, Florida. I've had my own private practice for the past 23 years now. Yeah, 23 years.
Where did you go to school, Dr. Venkatasan?
Oh, well, I went to school at Emory University, where I graduated in 1984 with a bachelor's degree in physics. And I got my medical degree from University of Miami School of Medicine, and I did my residency at the Madigan Army Medical Center.
Do you have any more relevant work experience to this case?
Certainly. I worked in the military as an orthopedic surgeon, physician, for about 6 or 7 years in the military. Yeah.
What about any certifications? Do you have those?
Yes, I'm board certified on the American Board of Orthopedic Surgeons with a subspecialty in sports medicine.
Dr. Skylar Venkatasan, I'd like to go back to that conclusion that you came to earlier. Did you use reliable methods to come to this conclusion?
Well, certainly. I've worked in this field for decades now, and I'm familiar with the reliable methods as well as reviewing all of the materials that were provided to me.
Have you ever testified in a case like this before?
Certainly. I've testified in over 50 cases in my career now, mainly for the defendant, but I've testified for the patient on occasion.
Your Honor, at this time, we would like to tender Dr. Skylar Venkatasan as an expert in sports medicine and orthopedic surgery.
No objections, Your Honor.
Okay, without objection, she's so qualified.
You mentioned a conclusion. What was that conclusion?
After reviewing all of the evidence that I was provided with, I was able to conclude that Dr. Davis did comply with the standard of care.
What is the standard of care?
You could think of it as the duty that you owe to your patients. It's basically a promise that you'll take care of them. It's set out by the CDC.
Why do you believe that Dr. Davis was within the standard of care?
I actually used 3 main reasons that I came to that I found she complied. The first being that she properly screened Mr. Thomas for the risk factors regarding addiction. The second being that the use of Vicodin HPV opioid in this case was appropriate. And the third, in relation with that previous one, it's that because of the opioid, the addictiveness, she properly informed Sloan of the risks that come along with it.
I want to take that one by one. First, you said that Sloan was properly screened by Dr. Davis. Now, how did Dr. Davis go about screening Sloan?
She used a medical history form, which is completely acceptable under the standard of care.
Would you recognize this form if I were to show you?
Yes, I would.
Your Honor, let the record reflect that my co-counsel, oh, Your Honor, may I have permission to screen share Exhibit 5A1 and 5B1?
Yes, ma'am.
It's already been entered. Are you familiar with this, Dr. Venkatasan?
Yes, I am.
What did Sloan Thomas list underneath his family medical history?
Glad you zoomed in. I could barely read it. It says high blood pressure and high cholesterol.
Would high blood pressure and high cholesterol prevent a doctor from prescribing Vicodin HP?
No, not at all. You see, high blood pressure and high cholesterol issues, they have to do with the cardiovascular system, in your blood. However, Vicodin, it doesn't really affect it. When you take too much of Vicodin, it affects your respiratory system. So there's really no overlap between the two. So it's perfectly acceptable to prescribe Vicodin HP based off of high blood pressure and high cholesterol.
The second point that you mentioned, Dr. Venkatasan, was that the use of an opioid was appropriate. Why do you believe it was appropriate?
Well, in order to mitigate the the pain that Mr. Thomas was in, as well as to walk him down the path of recovery.
I want to take it visit by visit. Why was it appropriate in the first visit?
Well, in 2013, Mr. Thomas had come in for a fractured ankle, in which Dr. Davis put a cast on it and prescribed Vicodin HP, which was appropriate in order to walk Sloan down the path of recovery to help heal his ankle.
What about the second visit? Was that prescription appropriate?
Yes. In March of 2017, Sloan came in with a torn rotator cuff in which Dr. Davis had to schedule surgery. Of course, in order to attend physical rehab, you can't be hurting too much when you move the shoulder around. So Dr. Davis prescribed another course of Vicodin HP, which was appropriate for recovery and pain management.
What about the third time that Dr. Davis prescribed it? Was that appropriate?
Yes. Mr. Thomas came in with another shoulder injury, the same shoulder that he had just had surgery on a few months prior, and it wasn't fully healed yet. And so Sloan also had another injury to his ankle. So it was completely appropriate to prescribe Vicodin HP to help heal the previous injury and the new one.
And finally, you said that Sloan was properly warned of the risk. How did Dr. Davis go about warning Sloan?
Well, she did so in a multitude of ways. The first being she verbally warned Sloan not to take any more than what was prescribed. She gave Sloan a medication guide, 5 times. And there was also warnings on the pill bottle that was given to Mrs. Thomas.
Oh. Would you recognize that medication guide if I were to show you?
I would.
Your Honor, permission to screen share Exhibit 2B?
Granted.
Do you recognize this, Dr. Venkatasan?
Yes, I do. This is the medication guide that was given from Dr. Davis to Mr. Thomas and his mother.
Is this a fair and accurate representation of that medication guide?
Yes, it looks like it.
Your Honor, pursuant to hearsay exception 803.18, we would like to read a portion of this onto the record, but not admit the exhibit.
Is there any objection, counsel?
Your Honor, if I could have a moment to check this particular exception.
Okay.
Thank you, Your Honor. Yes, Your Honor, I would respond by saying that under subsection B, this has to be solidified and demonstrated to be a reliable resource. And I don't believe any question to this effect has been asked for clarification on this. But if foundation is laid that this is a reliable resource, then I would have no objection under this particular exception.
Okay, so what I'm hearing you say is that you have a foundation objection and that counsel needs to ask proper foundation questions. Is that correct?
Yes, Your Honor, under 803.18b.
I believe he's correct, counsel. You might have a couple of questions to ask before we get to that point.
Yes, Your Honor. Are you aware of where this document originates?
Yes, it's from the physician's desk reference, that .net.
And who uses this medication guide typically?
Well, by physician's desk reference. So physicians use it to give to their patients, especially when prescribing opioids as addictive as Vicodin and HP.
Your Honor, pursuant to 803.18, we would like to read a portion of this onto the record and not enter the exhibit.
Counsel, any further objections?
Nothing further, Your Honor.
Okay, without objection, go ahead.
Could you read under the second bullet point underneath the while taking Vicodin, do not section?
It says, while taking Vicodin, do not drink alcohol or use prescription or over-the-counter medicines that contain alcohol. Using products containing alcohol during treatment with Vicodin may cause you to overdose and die.
Now, let's take a look at the autopsy report. Your Honor, permission to screen share the autopsy report, which has already been admitted.
Granted.
Dr. Venkatasan, could you read that synopsis that'll be highlighted on the screen?
Yes, it says the decedent, being Sloan Thomas, suffered respiratory arrest while at a fraternity party after consuming a combination of hydrocodone bitartrate, acetaminophen, which is what Vicodin is, and alcohol.
Your Honor, at this time, I have no further questions for this witness.
Okay. Reynolds, do you have some questions?
Yes, Your Honor. Permission to proceed?
Granted.
I'd just like to check with you on something that was mentioned in direct. In direct, you mentioned that acetaminophen was Vicodin HP. This isn't the case, correct?
Oh, no, I said hydrocodone bitartrate and acetaminophen is what Vicodin is.
Yes, that is correct. Now, you're being compensated in your effort for today's case, correct?
Of course.
That's right. Your rate is $500 per hour.
Well, yes, that's my standard rate, and that's what I charge the defense.
That's $300 per 15 minutes of a phone call.
Yes.
And $12,000 for a single appearance in trial.
Of course, I'm traveling all the way from Florida, and I expect to be paid for my time and travel and my work in today's case, just as you are.
Of course. Now that comes to a total of $34,400, correct?
It does. That's my standard rate.
Now, you only reviewed 2 out of 5 affidavits, correct?
I reviewed what was given to me.
But that's 2 out of 5, right?
That would be correct. I didn't have to review the other witnesses' affidavits. I'm here to talk about the standard of care and whether or not Dr. Davis met that.
There were 3 exhibits you skipped over, weren't there?
Well, I believe that those would not have helped me come to my conclusion. I wasn't given them, so no.
Let's move on to the risks associated with Vicodin HP. Hydrocodone carries a high risk of addiction, doesn't it?
Yes, it is an opioid, so it's an addictive substance.
But this can be mitigated if the drug is properly prescribed, correct?
Yes, properly prescribed and the patient is monitored properly.
Right. One way of mitigating this is to check for pre-existing high-risk factors, correct?
Correct, which Dr. Davis did.
These factors include a history of addiction, a history of alcohol abuse, and a genetic or family history of alcohol or drug abuse, correct?
Yes, all correct.
Right. And if a patient is high risk, that is, they have any of these high-risk factors, the physician must go to great lengths to ensure patient safety, right?
Well, they must monitor the patients a little more closely than what the standard of care would require.
Just a little more closely?
Yes, they have to monitor them more closely if they do have these susceptibilities to addiction.
Right. The physician must take precautions to ensure patient safety, correct?
Well, a physician must always take precautions to ensure patient safety.
I think you understand my point. My point is the physician must take greater precaution to ensure patient safety in this scenario, correct?
Well, if they do have those risk factors that come with addiction, they do have to take greater precautions.
That's right. The patient would have to be closely monitored for signs of abuse.
Correct.
This would entail drug screening, counting pills, and even researching information databases.
Yes, it would, which wouldn't apply in this case because Dr. Davis didn't have to do that.
But that is yes to my question, that if a patient is high risk, this would be the case.
Yes, that is a yes.
In addition to this, the physician would have to require in-person appointments before any prescription renewals, right?
Absolutely.
Now, with all this extra responsibility over high-risk patients that you've established, you as an orthopedic surgeon would expect that physicians be certain of whether or not their patients are high risk, correct?
Of course, this is why it's important that the patient disclose all relevant information on the medical history form.
But this would be the reason, right, that the physicians must be certain of whether or not patients are high risk. This would be the reason for properly checking for high risk factors, correct?
The reason for checking for high risk factors is required by the standard of care.
Certainly. Now, Your Honor, permission for my co-counsel to screen share a copy of this Exhibit 5B1.
Okay.
I apologize, Your Honor, it's taking just a moment to find the document.
No problem.
So this form checks if a patient has prior addictions, used alcohol, or abuses drugs, correct?
Yes, it does.
Okay, well, I'd like to direct your attention to the place on this form where it refers to a history of pain pill abuse. This will be right after the question, do you use any illicit drugs? Right where the cursor is. Please read along silently as I read aloud. Any history of alcohol/drug/pain pill abuse. Is this correct?
That is what the question asks, yes.
Right. Now, a personal history of abuse, that's one of those high-risk factors, isn't it?
Of course.
Now, this question refers to the personal history of abuse.
Well, it says any history.
So is that a yes to my question?
No, it says any history.
So what else could it refer to?
Any history of alcohol, drug, or pain pill abuse, meaning any history at all relating to the patient and their family.
So you're saying this could refer to something like family history of abuse, perhaps?
It could.
Now, isn't family history of addiction abuse that you just mentioned, isn't that a critical high-risk factor?
Of course, which Mr. Thomas nor his mother placed on this form.
Well, let me put this to you. If, say, a patient like Cameron Thomas looked at this question and thought, or Sloan Thomas looked at this question and thought, oh, this refers to my personal history of abuse, wouldn't Dr. Davis be given inaccurate information as it relates to the family history of abuse?
I'm sorry, I can't testify as to what Sloan Thomas would have done or his mindset. I'm not sure.
You can't give me your expert opinion relating to what might have happened if a patient answered one way or another on this orthopedic surgeon's form.
Well, could you repeat your question?
Yes, my question was, if, for instance, a patient like Sloan or Cameron Thomas thought this meant personal history of abuse, wouldn't Dr. Davis be given inaccurate information that relates to family history of abuse? This would be because the patient misinterpreted the question.
I'm not sure I understand the question. Sloan omitted the fact that he had a history of painful abuse in December from Dr. Davis.
Dr. Venkatasan, it's as simple as this. If the patient misinterpreted the question.
Objection, Your Honor, relevance. Under Rule 401, may I be heard?
Well, the objection is proper because right now it's very argumentative and it's speculative. The question is not what happened in this case. It's what if something else happened?
Your Honor, may I respond?
Briefly.
Yes, Your Honor, even though it's possible this might be speculative, I would respond to that by saying that this witness is able, as an expert in orthopedic surgery and sports medicine, to be able to testify to what could happen if a witness were to answer a certain way. Because she also employs such forms, she's able to understand that if a witness were to put down a patient were to put down a certain answer, then the doctor would have information as a result of this. It's not speculation, Your Honor, it's just simply an opinion based off her expertise.
May I respond, Your Honor?
No, that's not necessary. The fact of the matter, counsel, is that in this case, we're dealing with specific facts. And therefore, that's what we're going to stay to. So what you're asking her is a hypothetical that does not have any of the facts that are present in this case, at least not to this point. The objection is sustained.
Yes, Your Honor. I did not understand the objection was to relevance and not speculation. All the same, I can move on. So
Okay.
now you would agree that Sloan did exhibit concerning signs of addiction, correct?
Well, now I could say that, but looking at it from this point of view, we know that Sloan was addicted, so therefore we can say that he showed signs of addiction.
But Sloan did in fact exhibit these signs, correct?
What signs exactly?
Signs of addiction, mood swings, anxiety, and a preoccupation with obtaining more Vicodin.
Well, all of those are also signs of pain.
Right, but they are possible signs of addiction, correct?
Potentially, yes.
Dr. Davis did not act on these signs.
Well, no, there was no need to. Sloan expressed multiple times that he was still in pain.
Now, you're here in court today to give your opinion as to whether or not Dr. Davis breached the standard of care, correct?
You are correct.
You would agree with the statement that the length and dosage are thoroughly integrated into the idea of the standard of care, right?
Well, more so the dosage rather than the length.
But the length certainly applies, doesn't it?
Sure.
Then you would agree that the length and dosage, if improper or excessive, these can cause harm to a patient,
If
correct?
they are improper, which they weren't in this case.
Of course. Now, considering this, what is your expert opinion relating to the length and dosage specifically of Dr. Davis's actions in 2017 towards Sloan?
They were perfectly acceptable and met the standard of care, considering Sloan nor Cameron disclosed their family history of addiction, nor did Sloan disclose his own history with addiction. So it was completely appropriate for Dr. Davis to prescribe a 30-day course of Vicodin HP with
Now,
180.
this is your opinion now. So let me clarify for the jury. You actually formed this opinion today after hearing all of the information in court, correct?
I was able to conclude that, yes.
Let me just clarify so that this can be understood by the jury. Prior to coming into court today, you didn't have an expert opinion that relates to the length and dosage, correct?
I never explicitly placed it in my report, but I thought it was a given that the length and dosage was appropriate.
Oh, so you just implied your expert opinion?
No, that's not what I said.
It sounds like you said that you never specifically put it in there, but assumed it was obvious.
Of course, the length and dosage was appropriate.
So you made an assumption like that in your expert report. You didn't state it explicitly.
Well, I never explicitly stated that in my expert report.
Thank you, Your Honor. I have no further questions at this time.
Okay. All right.
May I redirect, Your Honor?
Okay.
Dr. Venkatasan, you believe that the prescription was appropriate, or do you believe that the prescription was appropriate?
Of course it was. In order to mitigate Sloan Thomas's pain and walk him down the path of recovery, it was appropriate for Dr. Davis to prescribe a 30-day course of 180 pills of Vicodin HP.
Would that prescription include length and dosage?
Yes, I agree that Dr. Davis met the standard of care. That's what I was saying, that Dr. Davis met the standard of care. That means she met the proper length and dosage that was prescribed.
And on cross-examination, you said that it's important to disclose all relevant information on the medical history form. Did Sloan Thomas do that?
No, Sloan Thomas did not note that he went to drug rehabilitation just a few months prior on this medical history form. Therefore, Dr. Davis had no reason to believe that there would be no reason to not to prescribe an opioid like Vicodin HP.
Your Honor, I have nothing further for this witness.
Your Honor, brief recross.
I don't think she did anything that you didn't do on your cross.
Yes, Your Honor, I'd like to briefly address one of the claims that she made in rebuttal of one of my arguments. It would stay to the context of the redirect, Your Honor.
I'll give you one question and see where you're going.
Yes, Your Honor. Permission to have my co-counsel screen share a copy of this witness's affidavit for purposes of impeachment.
That
Your
was
Honor.
not done on redirect, so that would be beyond redirect. So that would not be proper.
Yes, Your Honor. The purpose of screen sharing the affidavit is to ask the witness a certain question to find an opinion of hers. Would you prefer I ask the question first?
Well, you have one question.
Your Honor, the question can only be asked upon seeing the affidavit, as the question would be, please point me to where in your affidavit you find this.
Well, since there was no question in redirect as to her affidavit, and you had plenty of time talking about her affidavit, it would not be proper to have a recross on something that was not brought up in redirect.
Yes, Your Honor. It's not necessary to do a redirect.
Okay. All right, Doctor, you can step down.
With that, Your Honor, the defense has no further witnesses.
Okay. So the defense case in chief is concluded. We're going to take a couple minutes to finish the scoring, and then we'll have the closing arguments. So if you just prepare your arguments, we'll be with you in a couple minutes.